This is the R4DS rlang book club, package club. I don't have a clean name for these things yet. And today, Arthur is going to be leading us in a discussion about the first tidy evaluation section. So take it away.
Yeah, so I'll try to walk us through a couple vignettes today. So on the agenda today are two vignettes that I guess purport to be sort of the beginning of the discussion of tidy evaluation. So in the overviews, what is data masking and do I need the embrace operator? Why do I need the embrace operator? And then going a little bit further is looking at some common patterns of data masking programming. Bear with me during this. I did my best to follow John's sage strategy of kind of reading through the docs and writing things down, control clicking on links, writing my notes, and then kind of iterating through that. I feel like I might be a few iterations short of cogent, but we'll see. So with all that said, kind of the broad objectives for today are really to kind of learn why data masking exists and how it works in theory. The first vignette really talks a lot about theory, at least to my reading. And then how can we use this kind of pattern of programming in practice? And so that's going to talk a little bit more about the second vignette. So what's the fundamental problem? There are probably lots of problems. I think there are actually quite a lot of problems that rlang and tidy eval are aiming to solve. But as I was trying to kind of come up with a motivation, I kept coming back to two things that seemed like the vignette was really trying to the vignettes are really trying to bring home. Is the first problem is one of reference, I guess I'll say, and the second one is evaluation. So first to the problem of reference. So I think, for those of us who are like me and probably who kind of are our users first and maybe are developers on the side potentially, we've all grown really accustomed to whoops, sorry, I copied and pasted the wrong thing here. We're really accustomed to using tidyverse functions, which kind of auto-magically take the arguments that you intend and do the things you intend and return something that you want. And so we're really used to, and I'll toggle to the place I was trying to source this from. We're really used to something like something where you can just kind of type. Maybe let's just throw open a console or something and type. Sorry about that. I copied and pasted the wrong thing and just noticed it now, which is the way of things.
Of course.
Let's imagine that you, and let me punch up the size here. Let's imagine that you wanted to do something like I don't know, dplyr, and let's say count empty cars and cylinder, right? Do something to that effect. So here, we have a function that takes a data set, so nothing new, and then takes the bare name of a column. And this is, I think, the part that's maybe a little bit new from the historic perspective of R and I guess its predecessor S, is that we can kind of type this name and not have to refer to where this thing exists, right? And so we've kind of grown accustomed to be able to kind of have a, I guess you can call it like an improper search path where we can simply type the name of the column here within as an argument, and our tidy functions just know where to look to resolve that reference. Before things were tidy, or at least a tidyverse existed, if you wanted to perform some kind of computation like this, you'd have to have this full reference to the columns of a data frame, where you'd have the data frame $, or some kind of other subsetting operator, and then point to the column. So here, we're recognizing that, data frames are objects, and then columns are sort of parts of our data frame object. So we're kind of providing a full search path so that R can resolve this reference to this column. But with kind of tidyverse functions, there's something more that's going on, and we've grown accustomed to them. So there's this reference problem, right? And I think, as John pointed out during our first session, is that when you have tidy functions of this sort right here, you can see in my R console, it makes it really simple for the end user to kind of quickly type what they want, but it unfortunately makes it difficult for the developer to write a function that gives them what they want. So there's this kind of first problem of reference. There's also kind of a
Before
second.
you go on,
Sure.
I think it's obvious to you and to John what the second example was meant to be, but it's not obvious to me. Can you type it? What was that supposed to be?
Yeah, so I don't know what my exact example was, but it's something
Okay.
like this, Rebecca, where I have this function like count from dplyr.
Yeah.
I've got a data. So if we looked up the docs for whoops, okay, I can't type. Dplyr count. We'd see that we're looking for x is a data frame, and then we have this ellipsis, right? Which is this. Now they're starting to put this into the documentation, but this is a data masking, so variables to group by. So we're just providing some list of variables so that dplyr can kind of like perform a count within that group. So what I'm not writing is this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that would also work.
It worked, yeah.
Can you go ahead and flip back for a sec?
Sure.
I think I know what you wanted here. I think you wanted something kind of like that, where you're giving it, imagine your own function that takes the empty cars as an argument, and then it just takes the bare column names for whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
But so yeah, it's basically it shouldn't have empty cars $sign in the bottom.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for the save, John.
Yeah, no problem.
So I mean, I guess we can all recognize that in the code. Let me bring it back up that John passed over. Let's say I clicked on the wrong thing. You can still see my screen, I hope.
We see the notes.
Okay, brilliant. So and also the chat window.
We do not see the chat window.
Okay, I guess that becomes invisible to Zoom. That I just learned.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, this is what John had typed in chat. Is you have some function like this, my mean, which would take empty cars, right? And this. So if R is kind of resolving this, it's going to try to look up in the global environment empty cars. That's not a problem. That's in the global environment, or whatever the parent environment is. It's going to try to attempt to look up cylinder because it expects that this is just a normal object that's in the global environment, and the same with the AM. And it's not gonna find that reference if this weren't like a tidy function. Instead we'd have to kind of like fully qualify this empty cars, something like that, in order for it to work. So it's this problem of sort of like finding the reference to these objects. So the data set is an object, but the columns aren't objects, at least in the global environment. I don't know if that makes any more sense, Rebecca, or if
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay. Thanks. I just
no, thanks.
Wanted
thanks
to
for
be on board from the beginning.
Yeah, thanks for pausing me on that one. The other The other kind of problem, I think, and these kind of two problems are of my own invention here, so I may have gotten it wrong, but I was kind of framing it, so trying to frame it. So the other problem I see, that that exists and that rlang is kind of trying to help solve is that, functions, if we want to have a tidy function, kind of like this. So this is actually what John threw into chat. What I was meaning to copy paste above is we'd want to have some function like this. It's going to take columns as arguments, but the trouble is that R is going to be a little bit overeager in trying to evaluate these references to these arguments. So what we want to do is we want to tell R to sort of be patient and yes, evaluate these references, but wait and evaluate these references in the proper time and place. So proper time is when we're executing the function. So as it gets resolved in the body of the function, and the proper place is evaluate it within the context of a function that's kind of calling it. This is maybe not the best example because it errors here, but hopefully you can kind of see the general idea. Is like we want to refer to a column. We want R to resolve that reference to a column in a data frame, but we want to have it resolve when our function is ready for R to resolve that reference. So basically what we're going to have to do, I guess, is kind of setting up things is we're going to have to find some mechanism, or rlang is going to provide us some mechanism where we can basically defer the evaluation and then tell R in what context to evaluate that reference. Does that make sense?
It mostly does. The part that I don't quite understand, that hopefully will coalesce later, is the details of the relevance of time. Like, it's not obvious to me that, like, why wouldn't it be?
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe I'm wrong on the time dimension, actually. But I like John, maybe you've got a better understanding of this.
So if we kind of work from the inside out, like if you were just calling dplyr summarize data mean var1 plus var2 in your console, it is looking in a data frame named data and is looking for the column named var1 and the column named var2. Because summarize does its trick of always looking for the columns inside of the data frame, but there are no columns named var1 and var2 in that data, in MT cars. There are columns named sil and am, and so you want that summarize to not actually look for var1 and var2. You want it to look for what var1 and var2 are referring to. And so to come back from the outside back in, when you call my mean, sil is like a thing that doesn't exist when you call the function. And so then when it's trying to be used, like when var1 is trying to be used, it doesn't know what the heck sil is. It doesn't, because outside of the function, sil had no meaning when you called it. I'm not sure that's helping a lot more, but that's the idea of all of this evaluation stuff, is so that you can pass sil in as a user and have it make its way down into summarize, and summarize knows that. And sorry, the point being, you can pass any column name in, whether it's sil or am or mpg or whatever, and it'll get passed through to summarize properly. Whereas by default, summarize, it's again that because summarize is trying to be clever, it makes programming with it more difficult. It makes using it easier, programming with it more difficult. And so that's the other thing that tidy evaluation exists for, is to allow us to work with the other functions that work with functions that use the tidy evaluation.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense of the big picture. I think I'm looking forward to the diffusal thing too, because I think that helps understand the timing bit maybe a little bit. But,
yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, and thanks, John, for the excellent explanation.
And by the way, just to be very clear, yes, please ask all these questions, because thinking through these answers is like why I'm here. some of this, like I've read a lot of this stuff, but I haven't, taught it. And so I don't know it as well as I would like. So, yay.
Thanks for that. I'm happy to supply the question. This is great. Thank you guys both.
You're welcome.
So I guess kind of these two problems, at least as I'd kind of frame them, the reference problem, the evaluation problem. So data masking kind of has a solution for each. So kind of here's how it broadly, in broad terms, like goes about solving problem one. First it kind of elevates the data environment. So if the function is kind of like looking for a reference to an object, it's going to look in kind of the parent environment, or like let's say the global environment, for an object named whatever, sil or am, for example. But as if we're passing to a function the names of columns, those columns are only defined within a data frame, right? So we basically what tidy, or sorry, data masking does is that it enables it kind of on the technical side, as I understand it, it basically allows, it creates a mechanism whereby those columns are evaluated within like the proper environment, namely like the data environment. So as R is searching for a reference to sil, for example, it's going to hit the data frame first before it goes outside, looking outside to the parent environment. So to do that, I guess on the technical side, it sort of makes the first environment of reference the data environment, and so it kind of changes a little bit the search path that R would go through as it kind of tries to figure out what is sil, where do I find its value. So that's kind of the first thing, is it elevates the data environment. So data becomes an environment, right? Whereas in base R it's not, at least by default. And then also it kind of helps you like so another way, that kind of complementary way that tidy data masking kind of helps, is it helps you with disambiguate kind of references. So now I guess in kind of solving a problem, we've maybe created another one, or data masking and solving kind of one aspect of the problem creates another one. So if it elevates the data environment, so within a function that uses data masking, it says, resolve references within the data environment. What if as a programmer, you want your function to refer for one argument to the data environment, and then for another argument to the parent environment, like let's say the global environment? You need to have some mechanisms to say where R should look to find the value of some named object. So with data masking, they kind of provide these two pronouns, as they call it, that basically tell R where to look. So there's a .data pronoun that refers to an object, that helps you refer to an object that exists in the data environment, and a .env pronoun that refers to an object that exists in the parent environment, or the global environment. So maybe I'll kind of toggle to this one really quickly. The example. So I'm kind of presenting this a little bit in a different order than they had, so it makes looking for references a little harder than it should be. So for example, let's imagine that we have the summarize function, where we want to kind of look, we want to, this is maybe a strange thing, where we're summarizing two things. We're summarizing the column cylinder, and then some object in the global environment named cylinder. So we'll have cylinder equal 1,000, and then in the data frame we have a column named cylinder. So we can disambiguate this reference in this way. So you can, as you refer to the object, you say .data $, and then sil. So that refers to the column cylinder in the data frame, and the data frame empty cars. Whereas with the .env $sil, it refers to this cylinder. And in fact, when you summarize that, you get sort of what you expect.
I'm surprised they don't show the case that I have run into the most, where you know, you have sil equals 2 in the environment and you want to do a filter. And if you just say filter, you know, dplyr filter sil equals sil, it totally ignores the environment and gives you every row, because sil, you know, sil equals sil. The sil column is always equal to the sil column. And so that doesn't do anything. But if you know, if you do .data $sil equals .env $sil, then it actually works. So
Right.
that's the, like, actually, I should probably do a pull request on this. Like, that's by far the most obvious example to me of why these pronouns are useful. And then they come up in all kinds of other, like I haven't used env as much, but it does like randomly, there'll be a case where I'm like, oh, that's going to be ambiguous. And either I could go rename this variable in 100 places, or I can use the .env pronoun to avoid the collision.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's I think yours is definitely a better example. I mean, maybe this is a little bit more compact in terms of presentation, but it's maybe a little less practical.
You could just throw in n rows at the end to show that it got every row.
Yeah,
expecting it to
there
get,
you are.
You know, some fewer rows. Anyway, yeah, I'll have to throw that in.
Yeah. So basically, we have kind of two mechanisms for solving this reference problem. So again, that we're prioritizing the data environment when resolving kind of references to objects, and second, we have some mechanism with rlang where we can sort of we can say we can kind of indicate which environment we want R to look in to resolve a reference, whether it's the data environment or the parent environment. Second problem, so this kind of you know, I guess the initial problem was, you know, evaluation. So here, you know, we want R to kind of we want to be able to make sure that R doesn't evaluate. I guess coming back to actually to the nice example John gave right here. So here we're referring to var1, and here we're referring to var2. We want to make sure that R doesn't, you know, eagerly go searching for some object named var1, but instead we want it to go looking for, you know, what we feed it is the argument, like a name of a column. So what we need to do in order for that to happen is we need to kind of diffuse evaluation. So kind of slow R down a little bit in terms of, you know, not being so eager to kind of look for the thing, and then secondly is you know, inject kind of like a blueprint into the code of like where we want it to look. So yeah, as you were saying, like if R kind of looks, you know, looks at at the code that we kind of saw previously, maybe I can open this in another tab. This will maybe be a little irritating, but we'll see. There we go. So we want R to kind of look. We don't want it to look for this object, but for sort of treat this thing as a placeholder or whatever value, whatever name we provide in these arguments, there column names. So we need to kind of diffuse evaluation. So make sure that R doesn't try to resolve a reference to an object named var1. Instead, we want it to resolve reference to the thing for which it stands. So we need to have some way to kind of quote or diffuse that reference, and there are kind of two mechanisms for doing that rlang provides. So one is you can have this pattern where you can kind of quote a variable and then at some point and then evaluate it with the bang operator. But we'll come to this a little bit later, but just suffice it to say that there's kind of this pattern where you diffuse and then evaluate, right? So you can diffuse evaluation with the quoting and then later evaluate it with the bang bang operator. Or you can kind of do the two things in one go by just having this embrace operator. So it'll look a little something like, sorry, I should have been much better prepared. You know, as you see here. So this is basically saying, you know, hold on R, don't go looking for some object named var1. Instead, go looking for, you know, this is kind of almost a blueprint, you know, where we're going to substitute in whatever the name is that is associated with the argument var1, and likewise for var2. I think it's probably not so coincidental. This looks a little like glue in a certain sense, because you're almost building for R kind of a templated code where you're going to, you know, like interpolate whatever the value is that you're passing to it here, there. So in a sense, like this is a blueprint of code that'll kind of get resolved at runtime. Like, what is the reference? The reference to var1 is whatever the user passes as a value of to the argument of var1, and likewise var2. So this is one way that you can kind of both diffuse and inject kind of or diffuse and evaluate kind of in one fell swoop with the embrace operator in certain cases. And we'll come a little bit shortly to kind of say what would be those cases exactly. So I failed to. Yeah. So then also you're going to in a sense, like, you know, if we're looking at this right here, we sort of don't want to, we're not wanting to refer to var1 or var2. We want to refer to whatever the user's provided as the value of var1 and the value of var2. So we want to sort of inject that value into the body of the code, so that when, you know, at kind of runtime of the function, whatever the user passes as var1 and var2 will get evaluated. So in this example here, for example, with my mean, that's using the embrace operator, you know, the user is saying that var1 is equal to sil, var2 is equal to am, and then in the body of the function, basically this almost kind of like bare name is getting substituted here, and this bare name is getting substituted there, so that R will, you know, basically inject, you know, it's injecting this this name into the proper place, and then attempting to execute that code.
Can you go ahead and go back to that for a second?
Yep.
Because I think just pausing on that for a sec, like, really, it is like glue syntax. And I don't know how much you've worked with glue, Rebecca, but that's where you can use the curly braces. Okay, good, great.
I mean,
so,
some
yeah, use the
don't always understand exactly. Yeah, I definitely use it. Sometimes it seems magical.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And that,
Yeah,
you know, its main magic is that you use the curly braces in a variable name, and it'll substitute in the whatever the value is. And here it's like you're setting up, you know, in the function when you defined it, you're putting places for the user to fill in code. And so var1 represents whatever they send in as var1, as if you had typed it in the code with the curly braces around it. And so you know, you're creating this call, that's dplyr summarize data sil am without any, or mean of sil plus am without any of the curly braces and var1. Like, it just substitutes it in. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. Like, I had almost gotten there, but especially because they have all the glue stuff baked into this now. But yeah, just thinking of it as you're setting it up so that your user can edit the code that you wrote, just with some functions or with some arguments. I think that'll probably help a lot.
Yeah,
and
just to expand on that, John, it's like, you know, I mean, I kind of feel like with rlang, this is, I think, maybe the most approachable example where you can kind of intuit what's going on, particularly if you have some prior experience with, you know, glue or a mustache or something like some kind of templating kind of mechanism. But even for the more complicated patterns, I think it's really a lot of the same. So you may have to do some additional steps to kind of achieve this type of thing, but broadly speaking, like my kind of understanding is that you're capturing user inputs, and then you're kind of holding on to them, maybe modifying them in some way, and then injecting them in the proper place. That's kind of the whole game. That's at least for this part with the injection. It gets a little bit more complicated with other mechanisms, but I think that the idea is the same.
So does does one of these cover when the curly is not enough and when you need to do the
sort of yeah, not really. I think in these two vignettes,
okay.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think kind of like yes, insofar as they clearly say this works when your argument is going to refer to a single variable, right? When your argument doesn't refer to a single variable, then you need to have some other mechanism of like taking what the user has provided to the function and then preparing it so that the target function, like inside the body of your function, is can kind of consume it in the proper form. So for example, if var1 instead referred to a list of variables, this curly would no longer work. You'd have to go looking for another mechanism to kind of like achieve the same.
Okay, that's helpful.
The trouble is, like, I feel like there are lots of cases and subcases, so it could get a little gnarly. But
I think
that's kind of the general idea.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is why there's a whole like metaprogramming section separate from the kind of baseline tidy evaluation, that it goes, that's where we really get into the not crazy, but whatever, the more special cases, more general cases, I guess.
Yeah.
Versus tidy evaluation is one specific case. But it's funny, like the book Advanced R, the Embrace didn't exist yet when that came out, and it came out right after the second edition of the book came out. And it just makes the curly Embrace makes all of this so much easier to work with.
Yeah.
Especially with the glue metaphor now, like it just makes it so much clearer what you're doing, and it works probably more than 90% of the time with the kinds of things you want to program with the tidyverse. And so basically you want curly unless you try it and it doesn't work, is my short answer to that. And then you'll start to learn examples where, oh wait, that doesn't work. But
or John, I would like add to that, like, or if your function is expecting a different type, different kind of, so instead of getting a bare name, your function is receiving a string name, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, sorry. So it's definitely only when you're doing dplyr stuff and sometimes tidyr stuff that you'll want the curlies. And then or the Embrace. And the other thought I had has left me. But so oh, that's the other thing is the other thing that I don't think they did point it out here, but Jenny Bryan had a talk right when this stuff was starting to become more like codified, and her like big point right up front was probably you just want dots. Like here you want to put var1 and var2 into specific places into the call, but a lot of times you're just saying whatever column names the user passes in, I want to pass on to summarize or to group or to whatever. And in that case, you can just make your function take ... and then pass that ... through to whatever function you're calling. So I'd say that's probably, I don't know, a good 50% of the weird tidy cases. You can pass through the dots, and then 90% of that remaining 50%, you use curly, and then the 5% that's left over is your weird cases where you need bang bang and enquo or bang bang. Well, bang 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 comes up a little bit
Or
more.
sim or inquo, and then bang bang
Yeah.
bang bang bang. Yeah.
So anyway,
Now you guys are just
and
making stuff up.
It does
I
sound
know
like it,
things,
right?
but, yeah.
yeah, it
No, but
does.
I concur with you, John. Like I've actually not
Yeah.
used the dot dot dot. I feel like I should. I started like tinkering with rlang when the it was more like in quo bang bang world. And I hadn't updated my mental model until kind of sort of now.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like curly curly and dot 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 probably get you 80% of the way there, if not more.
And a useful thing to know with that, if you're writing a package, is Roxygen has directive import dot params, where you can
Oh,
give it, you say it's dot dot dot, which means it's the dots that go to this function. And so it will tell it to what do these dots refer to? Go get the help about those. Because that's the thing that drives me nuts is if you're just passing through dot dot dot, it's hard for a user to know, okay, but what can go in those dots? And so
Yes.
that combination can be really helpful. So at import dot params, and then let autocomplete help you figure out what goes there. But that's a way to make the dots more useful. Or that's actually another case where you might end up using things like bang bang and enquo is, well, I would have used dots, but I want to be nice to my user. And if I'm going to be nice to my user, that means more work for me. And so I put in the name of the argument and I want to, give help about what is supposed to go there. And then I have to do either embrace or the enquo and bang bang because again, I wanted to show that autocomplete help to the user. And therefore I put the actual variable name.
Yeah, I
Things
feel like
like
the
that,
the tab completion and the error handling and the understanding what goes there is for me an argument against dots, and when not as a package author, but when I'm looking at documentation. And I was helping someone yesterday who was like, oh, why didn't ggplot error on this? Like I fed it a wrong thing. Fed it a wrong title name and it didn't error. And I was like, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, well, that's because it thought it takes dots there. So it was just assuming that you were going to use it for something else. That was actually a pair value thing that you were allowed to pass it, and it just didn't use it, but it couldn't error because it could take anything there.
Right.
Not anything.
So I guess,
but yeah.
A rule of thumb, I don't know if this is a good a general guideline, but if the argument or if the function that you're passing the dots through to has dots as the argument, if you're actually passing, you're not creating dots, you're just passing it through to the other, like summarize, mutate, they have to take dots because you're naming the arguments as you go. Passing dots through to those is like free. Like definitely do that because those ones already have dots. You're not making anything ambiguous as long as you say it's the dots for mutate or it's the dots for summarize. But yeah, the dots are definitely dangerous, but they're a really powerful technique for passing things around for sure. And I am noticing, and I noticed as I started to try to read this, I mean, we'll see how, we're not going to get through as much as I wanted, but we're doing really well, I think. And this, this is going to be one of the hardest weeks because it's introducing all the concepts.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered this. Yeah, it just kind of like summarizes. It seems like data masking kind of broadly like diffuses arguments, makes data an environment so that the column references can be resolved in that environment, and then provides you mechanisms as a package, as a function author to indicate where those user provided arguments need to be evaluated in the chain of instructions that you have in your function.
Sorry, one more question.
Sure.
Do you
That's
mean
okay.
that point number 2? Do you mean make data an environment? Like, is that like, is this an environment with is that explicitly done, or how is that explicitly done?
So that's a good question. I haven't kind of like pulled back the curtain to see how that's done, but I mean in the docs actually they make a point. Yeah, talking about
Okay.
you can make it an environment. I assume that that's kind of a hint that indeed they do that in some fashion, because environment's just
Okay.
a list of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's why like
Yeah.
things talk about like the functional, like you'll see that it's in the, I feel like sometimes I don't know when I get this. I was, I guess when you type the function itself or something, it tells you that something comes from
Oh.
a functional environment, the functions environment.
Yes. There and yeah, because it tells you the what package the
Yeah.
function comes from as an environment.
Is that
Um,
related to this sort of?
It's sort of, yes, at least sort of. I think we'll probably see a lot, like there are a whole bunch of environment specific functions within rlang. And so I think let's just accept it for
Okay.
now that
Sure.
you can
Done.
turn lists into environments, and then we'll dig more into it when we get to those other things.
so now I guess jumping to the second vignette, and we'll see what we can do here. I mean, a lot of it's kind of on implementation, but so they make a point in the documentation. So this is kind of talking about the patterns for data masking programming. So in documentation, I think they made a few good points. So I just wanted to reproduce them here. So I'll read it aloud. It's like in a regular function, arguments can be defined in terms of a type of object that they accept. Okay. Second thing is data mask arguments are more complex. So this is also true, but they also arguments exhibit some special computational behaviors, which is kind of a little strange language. But basically, what they mean is that you'll find for in data masking, the arguments oftentimes they'll be of these following types. So you have like data masked expressions. So this would be something that an expression that refers to columns of the data frame that is provided to the function. So our example where we're looking at SIL in empty cars, right? That would be a data masked expression. Data masked symbols. It's pretty similar. Maybe we won't look at that too much. So another one is tidy evaluation. Some of these verbiage I'm just sort of reproducing and slightly editing from the documentation. Is the you're selecting columns. You're selecting columns to be used in a particular argument of the target function, like the function within the function, right? Within your function. And then those they're actually making this point that's interesting. I don't know I fully understand is there's actually with tidy selection, there's actually no masking that takes place. Expressions are either interpreted in the context of the data frame or evaluated in the user environment. But just suffice it to say that you have an argument that would accept an argument of a function that's using data masking that would accept data masked expressions, tidy selections, or dynamic dots, right? And here are a few examples of those in the wild. I'm in another club where we're reading through the dplyr documentation, and maybe this has always been there, but or maybe it's new. But in any event, I've recently noticed that if you look at some of these, some of this documentation, now they're a lot more explicit for some of these arguments that of what type of behavior they're expecting. So for data masking, let's look at mutate, for example. You come down to mutate and you've got your dots and it says data masking. You're looking for name value pairs. So that was kind of interesting. For tidy selection, for tidy selection, if you look at select, no surprises there. You come down to, you look at your dots, and here it's looking at tidy select, so one or more unquoted expressions, etc. Right? So some kind of tidy evaluation, or say tidy selection expression here. And then the last dynamic dots, and one that I kind of found in the wild really quickly was trying to find one is Tibble. So if you look at Tibble, you've got your dots right here, and then these are dynamic dots that are sets of kind of name value pairs, names of columns, and then the values of those of all the elements in that column. So basically, when you have this data, when you are working with functions in the tidyverse that are using data masking, oftentimes the arguments that they accept, not only do you know that they accept column names, but they accept column names that have a certain behavior about them, right? So they're using data masking expression here, or with select, they're using tidy select. So what then does that mean for us, I guess, as people who are maybe function authors? It means that basically, if you're working with these, if you're working with these functions in the tidyverse, you need to be aware of what arguments they accept, and then make sure that your functions that wrap these tidyverse functions provide the tidyverse functions with an argument of the expected type, but also that have this kind of argument behavior, as they're terming it. So in other words, if mutate is looking for data masked expressions, you need to provide it that. If if select is expecting tidy select expression, you need to provide it that, etc. So then this is where some of the kind of work and these like programming patterns comes in, of how then can you provide as a function author the functions that you're using, so tidyverse functions, the things that they expect. And so this is kind of the overview of the programming patterns. I mean, maybe before I move on, I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or comments, or hopefully better explanations of these things than I've offered.
As far as it is relatively recent, because they started getting strict about a lot of the tidy selection things used to accept data masking, or still do accept data masking, but now they throw a warning. Because it is different, it's, is it you want the contents of the column, or do you want just the name of the column? Is really the difference between those two, in a lot of cases at least. So I think I'm not sure that I think it's a good idea that they have called all this stuff out so much, because only programmers should care about it.
Yeah.
And so, but I think they're starting to get a little bit more strict, so that once they get to the point where they've gone through all their deprecation process and whatever, they can make their lives a little easier and probably do some more advanced things that right now they can't do, because they kind of merged two concepts into one when they first started. So I don't know. I don't know if they ever plan to actually make it break, or if they just plan to give those warnings and hope that they annoy people out of doing it the other way. But it's a relatively recent. Well, so I don't think they had it all so cleanly called out in all the help until recently. Like, it would say one or more tidy select whatever, and it wouldn't be a link, and it would just refer to tidy select, and it's like, what does that mean? Oh, okay, now I can just
I kind of have like an ambivalent feeling about this too, John. Like, on the one hand, like when it's well done, if I'm a naive user who doesn't know what's going on, it's like, okay, what is tidy select? I don't quite understand what I can definitely look at maybe the examples and try to figure out what this means, but it points me to kind of this whole family of functions that do tidy select. So I mean, that at least this particular case is kind of nice, but then you can probably read a little bit for, okay, not in this case. In this case, it just points to a very nice article, but in I think data masking or dynamic dots, I think it confuses more than it helps.
Yeah. Well, and even when you look at the ones that point to tidy select, it says one or more unquoted expressions separated by commas, and that is helpful language to a programmer.
Yeah,
but utterly meaningless to most users, I would think.
Yeah,
because it's by unquoted, they mean that you want quotes around it. Or I mean, you don't have to have quotes around it, but that's the cleanest way to do it. So it's you don't want the quote function wrapping it, you want quotation marks. And so I don't know, I think it's interesting, and I think that we will probably see further evolution in that area as they, hear from users and deal with things. There is something kind of like more and more, the things people complain about are like, in my packages that wrap the tidyverse, blah, blah, blah. And it seems to be a much more common thing that people are like doing the higher level stuff. And so I think that's where they're like, well, we've got to be prepared for these people who are writing packages, and it's the first time they've ever programmed anything, versus the people who are just using it in a script. It's a tough line.
Yeah, developers could also
someday...
be squeaky wheels. They're more apt to post,
exactly.
issues on GitHub or voice their problems, and first time users maybe not so much. They might just move on to Python. I don't know.
It'd be interesting if they could like, I mean, it would have to be like a base art thing, but have a switch of, am I a user or a developer? And change the help based on that.
Yeah.
Because they're moving more towards the developer help. And I think in a lot of cases, it is confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
yeah, let me, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we can probably start to wind down. And just the main thing I would need from you is go into the spreadsheet and mark off the things that we got through.
Did cover, yep.
Yeah. And then
at the limits, John, I could almost, I mean, since we just kind of started to touch on this, we could almost show this is not being covered. This vignette, because I kind of started a little bit with the setup here and didn't quite get to the patterns.
Okay, that's fine. I think let's do that, and I'll probably do some rewriting of the schedule, because like I knew going into it that I had written it really ambitiously, and I just didn't know what it would take. And we'll continue to adjust as we go. I said in the channel I'm out next week, but I think Priyanka signed up. Someone signed up, and so I'll just make sure she understands, or she knows what we're going to be covering. Yep. Or I guess knows the general idea of what we're going to be covering. And I will very strongly encourage her, once you check these in, to start from what you have and then do a little bit of refinement on it. And we'll keep iterating on things as we go.
The other thing, John, if you don't mind, is that just kind of I wasn't as prepared for this as I should have been, or at least it wasn't as crisp a presentation as it should have been. But I was kind of, as I was presenting, I kind of felt that like the strong tension in a certain sense. Like on the one hand, I felt like the documentation, I've used rlang before, and I still feel like I was sort of struggling a little. Well, two things. Like I was maybe struggling to kind of get what they're trying to pitch in some of the vignettes, and the other part is that I guess kind of once I got it, in many cases I felt like almost like I'm not sure, like their presentation might have been the better starting point rather than starting from a different point. So in other words, like in practical terms, I'm kind of wondering whether we should just kind of show the docs and talk through them.
Okay.
I mean, certainly there are value adds at certain points. I think if you happen to do some research that adds value, if only kind of references, for example, this whole tidy select bit that I found, I thought that was kind of an interesting link I hadn't noticed before, but which I think might help people better understand this argument behavior bit. Maybe we could add it, but I don't know. I don't have any answers. I just kind of felt like this weird feeling with this, and I don't know if others will feel the same. I'm not saying we should immediately stop. Right. I just wanted to flag that.
No, absolutely. Like as always with this club, it's weird because it is just reading documentation, not a book, and the documentation is particularly like hyperlinked, and so just reading it together does sometimes make sense. I think the general goal should be, make slides, and the slide might just be a link, but like put a note on that slide of, you know, things that you
Yeah.
want to discuss, or just, hey, we just need to cover like this whole thing. There's a lot in here. The slides can't really help. Or in some cases, it'll be, there's no need to go to the documentation. These are the 2 bullets that matter. You know, so I think it will be calling it while you're writing things, and we'll see what happens. And maybe sometimes we're more slide-like, and maybe sometimes we're more almost purely or really purely just go read the doc. Like the slide could say that, you know. Because I agree, like there is, there were valuable things that you had called out, and then there were other times when it's just copy and pasting from the doc.
Exactly.
So does that help? Yeah, I think we probably should be going back and forth. Even last week, you know, my notes were just about the package down. It wasn't really getting into the details, and I was still flipping back and forth. So I think that's totally fine. And don't like feel bad for flipping back and forth. I do still strongly encourage, as much as possible, if there's code that you're going to run, like run it in the slides instead of running it in your console, so that weird things don't happen and, you know, confuse or break the meeting. But obviously then you'll have a case where you're like, oh, I want to try that. And so we'll also be flipping to our consoles probably as we go. So yeah, it's not going to be perfect. And I'm interested to see what we come up with as we go. This is mostly just about, like, you know, going through the docs together. So a lot of the times we'll go to the docs. And a lot of the times, even when we don't think we're going to go to the docs, always include that link, because someone might have a question that we want to drill down into the docs with. And there is no harm in this taking longer, you know. So this package, like I said, is like the one that I was thinking of when we started the idea of reading through docs. Like, it has so much in it, and I think getting to the point where we really understand it. Like every time I read, I had it again today that I read something. I was trying to figure something out for an environment thing, and there was a side path I took, and I was like, oh, I've been doing this wrong. Well, not wrong, but there's a better way to do this thing that I've been doing around environments, so that they have like built-in caching. It's just there in our lang. So anyway, so I will see, well, I won't see everyone next week, but I'll see everyone on the video, and I look forward to seeing what you go over.
Yeah,
And
have a
Thanks.
thank
great
you very
trip.
much.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much
much.
this week.
And thanks for your patience as I mumbled through this.
Oh, it was wonderful. Please stop saying
It's-
that. It was really great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye all.
All right, bye.
All right, bye-bye.